First, you have to find a drum. Typical 55-gallon, 10 bucks, guy side of the road. I decided to flip it over and end up cutting the bottom off. You have to be careful because there's about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch lip on the drum. Here's the top, which will eventually be the bottom. I didn't want to mess with the bung holes. I'm just going to cut those out and re-weld them. Here's the bottom, has been cut off. You can kind of see this was coconut oil is what was in that container prior. That metal strip there is going to be welded onto the inside lip, and the kale wool, which I'll show you a little bit later, is going to wrap inside of there, and the steel will act as kind of a guide into the quote top of the kiln. Right, so here's the drum. The bottom's been cut off. Well, what was the bottom has been cut off. Showed that a minute ago. Okay, here's kind of the layout of it. The bottom there, that's the bottom of the drum. The floor, that's that 3/4 inch offset I was talking about. I'm going to use kale wool for my thermal insulation on the bottom as opposed to fire brick. And then about 24 inches up here is going to be the top. This is where the lid is going to set. That's where that small band I showed you is going to go in. And this is going to be basically the bottom of the wool right there. The whole entire unit will slip into the top. I used a cutoff saw here to make my cuts. You could use a torch. I suppose you could use a peanut grinder with a small cutting blade. Whatever you need, or a plasma torch, but I don't think you get such a clean cut. So anyway, that's where it sits at this point. Okay, so I mentioned that little offset on the bottom due to this lip right here. So there's my floor, my top of my wool. So it turns out 26 3/4 is what I'm going to give it a shot. I can always cut it down a little bit lower later, but I figure the kale wool is 2 inches. Or I'm sorry, 2 feet in width, and I'll have 1 inch on the bottom, 1 inch at the top, and I should end up right about 24, so not to waste any of my material. So anyway, that's it. We'll cut next. All right, so there's that little steel band I was talking about. Just clamped onto the side to get rid of that little gap. So I'm just going to tack weld all the way around and verify that this thing will actually fit inside of the drum, so I don't waste a bunch of time. All right, so I got that thing welded on, spot welded, luckily. And as I had mentioned earlier, I was a little concerned it may not fit quickly. From a little bit of Raku I've done, that lid's got to come on and off fairly quick. So a little beating on this drum, and we'll check in. Hey, one word of caution: beating on a drum like this, it's awfully loud. It echoes right out. So earmuffs are a good idea. Okay, rather than sit here and fight this, you can see what's happening on top of my drum. I'm hammering it and kind of bending my rim in. The idea is that the kale wool will sit inside of this area here, which has got a 1 inch recess, but the problem is that skirt coming down there is interfering with that go in. I was afraid this would be the case. So my next step is, and I've hung this a little bit long, is I'm just going to cut right on the center of this, which is a wide spot. It's the rim that's indented into the drum itself. So I think I'm going to try cutting, right along this zone right here, and that should give me, a nice wide preformed area. I hope it doesn't affect the integrity of the drum. If it does, maybe I'll just weld some angle iron or something on the inside to give it some more stability. So we'll see how this works. Okay, I'm going to lose about 4 inches, but that's okay. My initial pieces that I want to Raku are not going to be that big, anyhow, and I just want to see how this works. It's going actually much faster than I thought it would, so it's just a matter of getting another drum, I guess, if this doesn't work out. All right, so I'd say this is a little bit better. It's an easier fit, much easier. it tends to want to fall in maybe a little further than I would like it to. So I think what I'll do is I'll kind of run with this, and I'll add some tabs to the inside just to give the lid somewhere to sit. I don't think I'm going to lose a lot of heat out of that. Height looks fine. So far so good. All right, well, here we are. I'm about at the end. I don't feel like putting the legs on it right now. Anyway, got handles on the lid and waiting for the burner and the kale wool. The next steps are to get the stainless steel fasteners, get the holes drilled, and to get some expanded galvanized steel that will go on the inside that will hold on to the kale wool. I got the best deal at Clay King for the kale wool, and then I think it was Warner burners. I got the MK 750, which just the burner. I can get my own regulator and hose a lot cheaper than what they want to sell the entire kit for. But I think it's Warner burners or something like that. The MK 750 is a little smaller than I think it was the MK 1000 or 100. It's just not that big of a kiln at this point to need or to justify the need for such a large burner, and I want to be able to have a little bit more control. So I'm going to post this, and stay tuned. Hopefully in the next week or so I will have my next phase up with the kale wool, burner, and fasteners. Later.